by sight. In fact, as long as we walk by faith, everything is all right. But it's when we begin to walk by sight that we find ourselves on a shaky foundation. It's when I walk by faith, I begin to understand how not to let that which is external become internal. But you've got to walk by faith, because when you walk by sight, you look at everything that is around you, and that which is external suddenly becomes internal. But you have to learn to walk by faith. Consider, if you will, Nehemiah when he was building the wall with the group of committed faith partners. In 52 days, they were able to do what had not been done for 120 years. And they did it in 52 days, not because they did not have any opposition. They built the wall not because there was not any conflict or crises. They built the wall not because they did not go through any challenges, but they built the wall despite opposition. They built the wall despite conflict and crises. They built the wall because they had the faith to believe that if we just believe in God, God will bring us through. Is there anybody here this morning that says, if I just hold on to God's unchanging hand, I believe he will bring me through? Look at your neighbor and say, God will bring you through. And so for 52 days, they built this wall, and so they built it simply because they moved by faith. Well, fast forward to our text this morning, and we find a valuable lesson about walking by faith and not by sight. You remember on last week we began to unpack Matthew chapter 14, and it was in verse 22 that opens up and let us know that Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go to the other side. I like that. It said that Jesus made his disciples get into a boat as he stayed behind to talk to the crowd, to dismiss the crowd. He made his disciples get into a boat that he knew was headed toward a storm. You can't miss that, my brothers and sisters. Jesus, he says, get into the boat. And because he knows everything, he knew that the boat was headed toward trouble. He knew the boat was headed toward a storm. He knew the boat was headed to some rocky territory. He knew the boat was headed through some rains and some storms and some winds that were blowing. But he tells them, get into the boat. The text says he made them. In Hebrew, it simply means that he forced them to get into the boat. He says, you have no choice. Get on board. I'm going to stay here, and I want you to go towards the other shore. I had to look at that real close and say, why would Jesus force his disciples to get into a boat that he knew was headed toward a storm? Every now and then, God has to allow us to enter some uncomfortable situations so we can find out just where we stand with God. He allows them to go through an uncomfortable situation in hopes that they will discover that even though I'm going through an uncomfortable situation, I can take comfort in the fact that the comforter is still here. Is there anybody here this morning that says, I've learned something about my faith walk. I've learned something about my spiritual walk. I've learned something about me when I've had to go through some storms. I discovered just where I was standing with God when I had to enter some uncomfortable situations. He makes them get into the boat headed towards the other side and says that I'm going to stay right here. When we fast forward then to verse 24, we find that the disciples who are in the boat, they now find themselves in the middle of the sea. And Jesus is back on shore, and the destination is nowhere in sight. And now they're in the middle of the sea. I think Jesus, again, was testing their faith to find out, will you still believe even when you cannot see? He says, you're in the middle of the sea. You cannot see Jesus, but will you still believe that he's there? Somebody this morning, you in the middle of the sea. You in the middle of your faith walk. You in the middle of your spiritual journey. And the question is that even though you cannot physically see Jesus, do you still believe that he's standing right there by your side? Oh, I wish I had some witnesses here this morning. It says, I do not physically see him, but I still believe that he's walking with me. I still believe that he's talking with me. I still believe that he's just a prayer call away. They're in the middle of the sea, and Jesus is testing them to find out, will you still believe in me even when you cannot physically see me? Verse 25 tells us that now they are in the boat, and now they're in the middle of the sea, and the winds are blowing, and the waves are tossing back and forth. And here comes this figure walking on water. Jesus is walking on water to let them know that this is not a miracle, but this is what you can do when you learn to walk by faith. And last week we had the challenge to go ahead and make a leap of faith. Go ahead and walk on water. Look at somebody and say, I'm walking on water. I'm walking on water because I'm doing the impossible. I'm walking on water because I'm doing the unthinkable. I'm walking on water because everybody said I wouldn't be where I am today. I'm walking on water because they said I'd be dead by now. I'm walking on water because they said the sickness would have eaten me up already. I'm walking on water because they said I'd be broke, busted, and disgusted. I'm walking on water because they thought I would have lost my mind by now. I'm walking on water because they thought that what I've gone through would have caused me to permanently be set back, but I'm still standing. Yeah. Is there anybody testimony this morning that says I'm still standing? I'm still walking on water. I'm still making Sanballat mad. I'm still making Tobiah mad. I'm still making Geshem mad. I'm still determined to run on and see what the end is going to bring. When we fast forward to verse 28, we saw Peter was unsure if it was Jesus because it was 4 in the morning. And he's unsure because the clouds are hanging low if it's Jesus. But I like Peter's faith. Peter says, Lord, if it is you, here's my prayer. Bid me to come unto you. That's the kind of faith we've got to have. Lord, if it is you, bid me to come unto you. But I like what Peter is saying. If it's not you, I'm not going to make a move. I'm going to stand right here. Peter says, I'm not moving until I get my marching orders from you. I'm not moving unless I know I'm moving according to your will. And Jesus says, Peter, it is I. And Peter recognizes his voice. Yeah, my sheep know my voice, and a stranger they will not follow. Do you recognize Jesus' voice when he's talking to you? Do you recognize God's voice when he's talking to you? He says, come unto me. And Peter says, okay, I'm ready to make a leap of faith. I'm ready to step out into unknown territory. I'm ready to do the unthinkable. I'm ready to defy the laws of gravity. And Peter steps out of the water, step out of the boat. He steps onto the water and he leaves the crowd behind. Sometimes you've got to learn to leave the crowd behind. I better say that again. Yeah. Sometimes you've got to learn to leave naysayers behind. Sometimes you've got to learn to walk away from those that say you cannot do it. You've got to learn to walk away from negative thinking people. You've got to learn to walk away from people with negative outlooks. You got to learn to walk away from people that say your great granny was broke, your grandma was broke, your mama was broke, and you got to learn to walk away from it and say the devil is a lie. I don't care what my past may have been. I'm getting ready to make a leap of faith, and some things are getting ready to be turned around in my life. Is there anybody here this morning say during these 52 days I'm standing on faith that God is getting ready to turn some things around in my life? Look at your neighbor and say, neighbor, I mock my word. At the end of these 52 days I'm going to emerge brand new. I'm going to have a new